We have everyone here.
We can start.
Sure, we can start.
Okay, great. Sorry for the short delay, a little bit of technical difficulties, but I'd like to welcome you to the December 20th Regional Board meeting, and I want to recognize that we're holding this on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin people. We've got an agenda in front of us. I don't believe there have been any changes to it. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Director Lennox, thank you. Director Gisborne, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Moving on to the minutes for the November 24th regular board meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, can I get a motion to adopt the minutes? Director Gisborne, seconded. Director Lennox, thank you very much. Any discussion, I guess? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion carries. No delegations or inquiries, no unfinished business. We have 2 items of correspondence, and I guess, is there any business arising from the correspondence? None has been noted to this point. If not, then we'll move on to the chair's report. So, our board meeting is earlier than it typically is, but so I guess a little bit less has happened this month. But December 12th, I met with Nicholas Simons just to touch base and to discuss the upcoming term. One of the things we talked about was the bridge down at Lang Creek, with the hopes that he can put a little pressure on the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to at least look at the possibility of making improvements to it or adding pedestrian cycling bridges to make it safer for those engaged in active transportation. I use it quite a bit. There's a lot of people that cycle up here for tourism, so I think it'd be a really nice thing, but we'll see where that goes. On December 16th, the CAO and I took part in a Teams meeting with the new Minister of Municipal Affairs, Ann Kang. The purpose of the meeting was for the CAOs, chairs, and mayors in our region to be introduced to the new minister and for her to get an opportunity to hear what the pressing issues are in our respective communities. As you can imagine, many communities, including ours, are dealing with problems like homelessness, opioid addiction, and the scarcity of appropriate accommodations. I chose to bring attention to the fact that the QRD has suffered a big loss with the closing of the mill, and we need to access funding to help ease the tax burden as we transition to this new reality. Grant funding or capital projects and for economic diversification would really help. So I hope the new minister places those at a high priority. Along with a number of other attendees at the meeting with Minister Kang, I mentioned the Island Coastal Economic Trust, which we all know as ICET. I imagine you all know, but after 17 years, ICET is facing potential dissolution in 2023 if continued funding is not provided. ICET has created a proposal where the province provides at least $150 million to ICET as seed money so it can become a permanent trust and continue doing the good work that it does. Historically, Vancouver Island and Sunshine Coast has, the local governments here have received less than 10% of the provincial investment that local governments in other regions have through the trust they govern. And I think it's time for local governments in our region to get the support they deserve and need. That kind of wraps it up for the chair's report. For director's report, back at the end of last month, but after our board meeting on November 26th, I attended the Resilient Community Evacuation Supply Container Workshop. And I just want to give kudos to Jessie McDonald. She's contract worker with the QRD. She ran the workshop, and I really appreciate everybody that showed up for it. We had a number of representatives from, I guess, first responder organizations and just support personnel, including the Red Cross, the Rangers, Lang Bay Community Club, ham radio operators, all this kind of crew. And it was a fantastic workshop. We easily could have gone another hour or two. Some great ideas were tossed around: how to use the school in the event of an emergency, and how the supply container could be improved. The same day, there was a Resilient Community Preparedness Fair right after this workshop. It was a meet and greet for locals and for local and regional first response organizations to allow the public to get information on personal and household preparedness and to tour the local evacuation supply container. Unfortunately, it wasn't really well attended, but it's no shock. It was a Saturday afternoon. It was kind of cold and windy, and people, I guess, wanted to stay home by their fires. So, but the success of the morning session just kind of carried us through the day. December 4th, I helped serve and bus tables for the 2 Christmas dinner sittings at Lang Bay Hall. Smaller crowds this year. The last time we did it, I guess, was probably 2019. But some people are just a bit nervous about getting together, which makes sense. So there were fewer plates served, but it was still a lot of fun. And throughout December, Lang Bay Community Club collected supplies and gift cards for hampers for those in the community who are feeling the pinch these days. They supplied hampers to 11 families, and the donations from the public were very generous. So that wraps up my director's report. Director Elliott.
Thank
You
you.
want to run with it?
So I think my ability to get out there was a little bit quashed this last little while due to illnesses in my home. So I even missed a city council meeting because of that. But I did this last weekend attend Breakfast with Santa. And I have to say, our Rotary Club members are amazing at serving breakfast with Santa. They all did an amazing job. It was attended well. The kids had bouncy castles, face painting, a movie, Santa Claus, and pancakes. So it was pretty awesome. There was also an open house last night with our MLA Nicholas Simons and our MP Rachel Blaney, and I managed to attend that, and it was lovely. We were hoping for more attendance, but I guess there was a lot of snow going on at the same time, so we had extra food left over, and we all had to bring food home, so that worked out well. And I wanted to thank Director Brandner for bringing up the economic diversification with the minister, because I too think that's a huge priority for our region. Thank you.
Well done.
Hi.
Great. I will just keep going around the room to the strange blob on the screen. Sandy Victor McCormick.
What? Is it my turn? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. November 26th and 27th was the winter market at the community hall in Gillies Bay, and it's the first time in 3 years that this has taken place. So there was a lot of music, a lot of singing, a lot of happy people, and it was great to get together, very well attended. December the 2nd, I attended the Chicks sponsored spirit breakfast at Mary Mary's, and that was a fundraiser for the food bank. Let's see, also the same day, later on, the Chamber of Commerce had its first dinner meeting in 3 years' time. So they are in the process of being resurrected, and I'm sure we will hear more from them down the road. On the 7th of December, Texada Garden Club got together, so I got all caught up in pruning roses. December 11th was Breakfast with Santa, always a very memorable event, and also the truck parade that the 2 fire departments put on, and they take it all over the island, so everyone has an opportunity to see the brightly lit up and decorated trucks and the great people driving them. So let's see, on the 12th, I also met with Nicholas Simons, and this was on a specific topic, and that is the announcement by BC Ferries that they were no longer going to consider a pilot test run between Texada and Comox directly. So that was a big disappointment. In fact, a lot of people on Texada felt quite betrayed by that action. And so I followed that up with Nicholas Simons, and I will continue to be working with him down the road. So what else happened? On the 14th of December, the Texada Island Rec Commission met and heard ongoing concerns about ventilation under the community hall. Our operations staff have been at this like crazy for a few years now, and it's not a problem that's easily being resolved. So, stay tuned. That is going to have to be dealt with pretty soon. The commission also granted $15,000 to purchase table tennis tables, and so that is actually no, it's about $1,500. Sorry. Also, at the same rec commission meeting on the 14th, it was announced that Rotary will be building the same gazebo at the Venanda Ball Field that they're building on the mainland. And so that was pretty exciting news. And I don't want to, put rain on their parade. So I'm hoping we'll be making an announcement about that shortly. So just a couple more things. The commission is also recommending that electrical upgrade work be done at the Gillies Bay Ball Field, and that will be coming as the next round of our budget deliberations. On the 18th, there was an island-wide carol sing, and blissfully, that is the end of my report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Director McCormick. I was glad that you corrected yourself at the 15,000 down to 1,500, because that sounds like a lot of money for ping pong tables. And I was sorry to read about BC Ferries no longer continuing with the pilot project. Hopefully, the minds get changed there. Moving on, Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. December 12th, I met with the Liquid Waste Management Plan Monitoring Committee. I attended virtually because, much like Director Elliott, there's been a lot of illness going around, especially with young children, which I have 2 of. And of course, they run around licking doorknobs and coughing directly into your face. Me and my family
tell them not to.
they don't listen. They just do what they want. But that's what makes them so sweet. So a lot of virtual was the only real option for me during a lot of this time. And getting ready for the holidays, and I've been hearing more and more concerns expressed about the lack of housing options in the community, especially as the weather's been getting cold. Some people are looking into the new year with a lot of apprehension, especially people that I went to school with. I've given it a great deal of thought on how the regional district can show leadership in addressing this issue. How to reduce restrictions and provide residential flexibility in areas of the regional district has restricted access to housing. Therefore, I'm putting forward a notice of motion to be heard by the Planning Committee in January of 2023, that the Planning Committee recommend the board direct staff to report back on OCP amendments to increase and improve residential flexibility options with the following suggestions. 1, that the restriction on dwelling unit be redefined to be up to 5,000 square feet of residential space. I will send that to our corporate officer after the meeting. And if any other members of the Planning Committee have any thoughts, ideas, or additional suggestions on residential flexibility options, then I would encourage them to bring forward these ideas to the January 2023 Planning Committee. I have also more recently had some inquiries about the AVICC executive position, which nominations are coming up for. As many of you remember, I served 2 terms there, and I've been, some people have been asking if I'm going to consider running again, which I'm still on the fence, but I will figure that out over the holidays based on how busy my schedule is. And with that, that is the end of my director's report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. And you'll send that notice of motion off to the corporate. Yeah. Great. Moving up to the screen, let's hit Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. For once, it was a quiet month for me on Lasqueti. At the beginning of December, the community held a Christmas market at the community hall with funds going to the Parent Advisory Committee of the False Bay School. On December 12th, I attended the Vancouver Island Coastal Community Climate Leadership Plan. And in part, it was because I was still the alternate. We hadn't actually formalized the appointment of Director Elliott yet. So I told the committee, and there were other people in that same situation or other members. So they're actively ongoing and looking forward to new members, and a number of alternates were there because of appointments not being made and outgoing members. So that was a very good meeting. It was very short. They're planning on a new meeting in the new year, and I'll pass the information on to Director Elliott. And otherwise, things are snowy on Lasqueti, and looking forward to a break and a new year. Thank you.
Wow, that was a short report from Lasqueti. That doesn't happen very often.
Enjoy it while you can.
Yeah, right. Director Dowd.
Yeah, I'll just get unmuted there. And when I started looking at my calendar, I thought it had been a quiet month so far, but I'm not going to report on things other people have talked about, but I do want to talk about the meeting that actually I went to on the same day as our board meeting last time, and I don't recall if I made a thorough report to the board that night. But the Hospice Society is working on coming up with a new plan, and they had a community-wide consultation. Quite a long variety of different organizations were there, and it was really a workshop about exploring the need and the desires of the community for a hospice, what kind of a hospice, what sort of services to be available, who's willing to participate, things like that. It was a really worthwhile morning from my point of view, and there was a lot of different ideas proposed. A separate building on hospital property was one of the ideas, but there were many other ideas that were considered: how to provide the appropriate care, how to find out exactly what kind of hospice care people want to see in the community. And the result of that was a really good community discussion on all of those topics. And going forward, they're going to get together and continue and try to work out a written plan for the future with fully funded or fully thought out finances and plans for exactly what they'd like to build and how to go about doing it. And they were happy with the support that they've previously gotten from the regional hospital district, and are looking forward to our participation going forward. The next day was my first meeting for this term of North Island 911's board. And we went through all the history of the call volumes and the answer services for this year. The only dark spot, I think, in the response to telephone calls was the delays that came from the BC ambulance service not having actually fully staffed and up-to-date dispatching facilities on their own, which results in a lot of the calls being backlogged and not being answered quickly from North Island 911. But hopefully that will be resolved in the new year. The 28th, there was a community action team meeting, which I attended, and the focus there is drug use in the community. It's all about dealing with the fentanyl epidemic and the overdose epidemic that is, I think actually claiming more lives than COVID has in the last year or two, and is really a problem in the community. So there was a good discussion among a wide group there. Part of the discussion was about the upcoming legalization of small quantities of illicit drugs, and whether that will be actually a good thing or a problem. There was quite a difference of opinion around the people at that program talking about it, but it's on the radar for January. The day before that, looking at the calendar, going back, there was a movie at the Patricia Theater, which was called Love in the Time of Fentanyl, which was about the downtown east side harm reduction, overdose reduction facility, and their contributions, and basically a couple of days in the life of that facility, talking to the people who work there and the clients of the facility. And after that movie, there was a question and answer and a roundtable discussion with the panel of people who were actually the stars of the movie there, bringing, again, that same fentanyl crisis and a drug overdose crisis to the public attention. On a happier note, getting closer to Christmas, there's been more positive stuff, more socialization and more fun. I got to imagine carols by candlelight on the 9th of December. It was a great opportunity to see the kind of people in this community where they can get together and put on amateur entertainment that's of the highest quality I think you can get anywhere. So a quiet month, but I'm looking forward to the Christmas season and getting back down to work in January.
Great, thanks very much. Sounds like you had some interesting conversations this month.
They certainly were.
Last but not least, let's go to Area A, Director Lennox.
Yeah, lots of good memories from Carols by Candlelight as a youngster, and so I'm glad you got to attend. Now you made me jealous. Thanks, George. Illness was no stranger to our household as well. I think it's kind of gone through everybody. So but I as well thought, oh, it was a pretty slow month, but it wasn't. I was jotting down some notes here, even as you reminded me of a few things, and in no particular order. You know, lots of forwarding concerns, as you folks have been used to for years, to the appropriate agencies, even though you may not be the right person. So I'm learning how that all goes. But it's also given me an opportunity to talk to a lot of constituents about, you know, the issues at hand. So, you know, a lot of learning there. I was able to attend the Lund Waterworks District Update meeting held recently. Again, lots of activity. The receiver is doing some good work. Got some survey results back, and the community is actively engaged, and they're creating an advisory committee to figure out their long-term plans. So I like the approach, and I'm one of the 124 on the system, so obviously I'm interested. And we'll stay tuned. There's more to come from that group as they get more organized. Got to review the current status of our roads with the local area manager, who I've known for years, but in the new capacity, obviously, as many of the other directors can attest, Area A roads have some serious deficiencies that I'd like to see get up to at least a safe standard. So I'm going to be working with our local manager here, who I'm in full support of, to get there. I missed our Northside Volunteer Fire Department Christmas party. It was 1 day's notice, and that was a little too slim for me, but I understand from the members. They had a great meal and a good turnout. That's a strong group, and I'm going to make sure I don't miss it again next year. Also, CIMAC, the meeting there had some technical difficulties, and I remember now that it was our first snowfall, and I think a big slide of snow fell off my roof. I was able to log in with about 2 minutes left in the meeting, so I'm sure that staff will clue me into anything that came out of that meeting, but they're well organized and a good group. So I haven't heard anything major, so no news is good news. I was able to have a coffee meeting there with the new president of the Sunshine Coast Tourism Board, Christine Holman. Good close friend, speaking to Carols by Candlelight and the old days, and so she's raring to go in her new role. Lots of new things, so many different ideas. Just really neat to see that energy working on the Sunshine Coast, and I think that group is well served having her take over. So that was nice. Santa Claus Parade, very important to me every year. My old army truck got to go second in the parade behind the RCMP this year, so I don't know how I bumped up in the order there, but I do love supporting the Sea Cadets and the community that way, so that was a lot of fun, and my grandson got a few extra candies out of that deal. And then, you know, we mentioned the loss of the mill, and obviously I've experienced that personally, but also friends, family, and this community. And I attended the last local one, Unifor Local One Christmas party ever. That was pretty profound after 110 odd years of that, you know, those workers and that union that I was a part of. So it was awesome, a lot of fun, a lot of good camaraderie and stories from the old days. And looking ahead, you know, a lot of people, all the stories are different from folks as they moved out of the mill. So it was a busy month. So far so good. That's it.
Yeah, sounds like you had a little bit of everything.
A little bit.
Great. Director's report, so move on to the consent agenda. So does anybody have anything they want to remove from the consent agenda? There is one.
Yeah, just making sure I got the right agenda in front of me. I would like to pull item 10.5 from the consent agenda.
10.5.
Director's remuneration and expense amendment.
Okay. Anything else being pulled? All right, I'm seeing no hands up. So pulling 10.5.
Should
It will
we,
now be what?
should we vote on the block?
Let's do
We
the,
will.
yeah, so 10.5 will follow 11.1.
Okay, it'll be 11.1 now. And then, sorry, corporate officer, you said we still have to vote on the block.
Yes, yeah.
So I have somebody,
I'll move the block.
okay, thank you, Director Newport, seconded by Director Lennox. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, none opposed, motion carries. We move the rest of those items. So now we are down to 11.1, the previous 10.5. Let's get back up there. So we have a recommendation in front of us. Somebody like to move the recommendation or move an alternate recommendation?
I'll move an alternate recommendation. I'll move that the board approve a 2.25% increase to the director's annual indemnity and meeting allowance rates in 2023. And then the rest is the same as what's before us.
Okay, so we're just replacing a 6.0% with 2.25%. Do we have a seconder for this motion? I'm seeing no seconder. So we going back to somebody like to move the original recommendation. Dr. Elliott. Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder for the original? Director Lennox. Any discussion? Dr. Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I've taken a look at the staff report, our previous bylaw, and it's my understanding that our policy is that the staff recommend a consumer price index. And this year it is at roughly 6%, hence why we have a 6% increase before us. However, that's my understanding is the policy. That doesn't require the board to have a 6%. If we had a motion before us that was, required by bylaw, and that's a predetermined, motion, and therefore it wouldn't be before us to vote on. I don't really know of really anyone in the community that's seeing a 6% increase to wage increases. And I know everyone right now is feeling the pinch. And I just feel uncomfortable going with a 6% increase when, what is it? Our union is getting a 2.25. So hence why the previous motion that I put forward was a 2.25. Myself, I just don't feel comfortable supporting a 6% increase. The rest of the bylaw I think is fine. Meeting allowances, travel expenses, all of those, they make sense because that's reimbursements. The cost of ferries go up, mileage goes up. That's not money that we're putting into our pocket. But that 6% in the first part is a bit of a sticking point with me. And that's why I just don't feel I can support the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Director Gisborne opposed. Motion carries. So that is 1.1. Bring us to resolutions. Item 12.1, the 2023 Standing Committee and Board meeting schedule.
Chair?
Yes, Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to put forward an alternate recommendation that our corporate officer has the wording of, and I wonder if I could ask her to post it.
Okay, corporate officer, do you have that?
I'm sorry.
It's coming.
Well, we're into settings.
Sorry.
Okay, so we have here that motion is that option 2 be amended to move planning committee to the second Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. for all months except February. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair, that is correct. There is an additional part as well, and which would be like an and then there's another paragraph that is part of the motion. And it is about reviewing the schedule in 6 months' time.
Okay, I have it in front of me. I think the corporate officer has something to speak to this.
Yeah,
Okay.
review in June of 23. Yes.
So thank you, Chair. I think the intention first is to amend option 2 to reflect where you would like planning committee to be. And then once that goes, then there would be another motion after that to approve option 2 and then review it in June 2023. Is that correct? Is that the intention?
Yes.
Because option 2 currently doesn't have planning committee displayed like that.
Okay, so
Okay.
the idea is to amend option 2 first, vote on that, and then you can add the additional change to the motion.
Thank you, Sharon. If it's seconded, I would like to speak to it.
Second discussion.
Director Gisborne. So any discussion?
Yes.
Okay, Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. My reason for putting this forward is that I was thinking of very long days with all 3 meetings back to back to back, and leaving here for a 9 o'clock vote. Coming back from committee of the whole, chances are around 9 o'clock at night is when I'll be coming home on a 7:40 ferry. So it makes a very long day, and I'm concerned that by the end of that day that my head isn't going to be thinking as clearly as this certainly is in the beginning. I just think it's a very long day and 3 agendas. So in order to accommodate Director Fall being able to attend in person, I understand that finance and committee the whole need to stay together, but if planning at least was moved to a different day, then that would break it up somewhat so that I'm not looking at 12-hour days. I'm feeling discouraged about attending in person. And Andrew is only looking at 1 night in Powell River, so he's encouraged to attend. So, we're trying to, keep things in a positive manner. So I just think that this will help encourage in-person attendance and discourage fatigue at the end of the day. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other comments, Director Gisborne?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate Director McCormick's proposed amendment to option 2 by taking planning committee and moving it to a different day from our committee of the whole and finance committee meetings, because having all 3 meetings on the same day to me is a lot. However, moving it to be 1 day before, I'm not sure if that might necessarily be sufficient, because you're having your meeting on your Tuesday, and then the next day you're having your next 2 meetings. So I'm wondering, would it be better to maybe have even more of a gap, to have it say a week before? If we're going to have our meetings on Wednesdays, what about the idea of having it on the first Wednesday of the month, and then we have the other 2 meetings on the second Wednesday of the month? And I'm kind of curious to hear the input on the other planning committee members on whether that might work. I know I got some challenges with this meeting schedule and how we've got here, because we put forward the motion and then we have the discussion, and I think that's kind of got us into a bit of a problem where we're putting the cart before the horse, as opposed to having the discussion and then putting forward the motion, finding out what works for everyone and then putting forward the motion. Because right now it's the item before us is, will we have planning committee on the second Tuesday? And I'm not sure if that's necessarily the best day, because what I think Eli Mina has even on his website is, it's a myth. You don't have to have a motion on the floor to have a discussion, but that's kind of what we're doing. We put the motion before us and then we have the discussion. So I like where this is going. I just don't think it goes far enough. So I'd like to hear from chair of the planning committee for one.
Right now we've got a motion in front of us, so I think we need to discuss the 1 o'clock time, unless somebody wants to make an amendment, and then if we get a seconder for the amendment, we can then discuss an alternate day. But as for right now, we have people who want to speak to the motion as it is right now. So I think we should proceed with that. Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director McCormick and Director Gisborne. I think it's a good idea to amend the current motion with not having all the meetings on one day. I agree with Director Gisborne that the decision-making process for coming up with a schedule was very awkward and probably does not have the best schedule for it at this time. And reviewing it is probably going to be necessary. For future, it would be better to have more of a brainstorm session with all the options and then people voting on the options so we could come up with something that was ideal. I don't think it's a good idea to have a schedule that's great for everyone except for this person sort of thing, because this is more of this is somewhere where we should have had consensus and we don't right now. And we didn't have a consensus building process to come up with the original recommended schedule. We had a motion and that was done by majority, and I think it was the wrong process for this particular. Having said all of that, I also wanted people to understand that Western Stillwater's KEG is also on the second Wednesday of each month, starting at 6 p.m. So there is potentially a conflict for 2 of our members starting at 6 p.m. on that second Wednesday. So if we are going to take some stuff out, maybe we bump everything just a little earlier so that we don't have people getting up and leaving, or people missing important meetings.
Yeah. I mean, there was some emails sent around and requesting input on meeting times and dates. So it wasn't that it was just a shot in the dark and a motion made. There was some research done ahead of time. Not to say there couldn't have been more research, but yes.
Sorry, just as rebuttal to that, for me, it wouldn't have done it just to ask for my opinion, because I'm more interested in what works for other people to come up with what I support. So what I support depends on the round the table discussion around what works for people. Okay. And so it wasn't something you could do in a silo, in my opinion.
Okay. Thank you very much. Director Lennox.
I know Director Dowd also wanted.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Who was first?
We can let him. He's been waving for a while.
Sorry, Director Dowd. I didn't see you on the screen there. Go ahead.
No, I've just been waving. But anyway, I understand it's difficult to see everybody. But I don't have a problem with this motion. Actually, I kind of like it. But there was considerable consultation with everybody on the board for a considerable amount of time before we came up with the days that we have. And with the number of people that participate in the meetings, there are going to be conflicts because everybody has different agendas. They have different groups that they attend on a regular basis. And we have to, at some point, come to something we agree on and can be stable with, so we can schedule all of the other things that we all do and take care of those. So changing the day to the second Tuesday of the month and having it at 1 o'clock for the planning committee works well with me. I'm not a member of the planning committee, but all the people who are on the planning committee know that I like to attend because I have an interest in planning. I like to see what the regional district is doing, and I like to be there for the discussion. So if it takes place on a day when I can be there, I'm a happier camper. And I could be there on the second Tuesday of the month at 1 o'clock. And I'm not saying I should be a priority. I'm just saying that that would be acceptable to me, which is why I'm willing to vote in favor of this motion and to try to move the scheduling along. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Dowd. Director Lennox.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody's comments. I'm the chair of the planning committee, and I'm also, a working person. So I'm not going to vote in favor of this motion. I appreciate Director McCormick back and forth with me literally up to a few minutes before this meeting, and I think that's part of the problem. When I looked at this particular option, my employer is affected by my absence. And I thought, okay, well, if we're going to hammer it out in one day, I can step up and get that done. And I understood that adding another day, basically that uses up most of another day. And there's other ideas I think I have, can we put it on the regional board day or something like that if it has to couple up with another meeting. I kind of, as I've heard the discussions, I kind of like the fact of maybe stepping back and just having one more look at this and not having to make a decision tonight on the planning committee, because I just need to, to wrap my mind around. CO?
Corporate officer, yes.
Thank you. Just quickly looking at the schedule, I think the intention from Director McCormick was to have the and this was my mistake, was to have the planning committee to occur the day before. So that's not technically the second Tuesday of every month. That's how the Wednesdays worked out, but that's not how, so we might need to look at rewording that. With regards to timing, we are legislatively required to approve the schedule, I think by December 31st, and it needs to be advertised between January 1st and January 15th. So we do need to do that, but that does not mean that we can't change the schedule and advertise again. We would just need to budget for that. So we should make a decision on at least to make sure that our January or our first quarter are advertised, and then we can and then review it. Yeah. But can I speak further?
Please.
Chair? So if the intention is to have the Tuesday before the finance and the committee of the whole, you might want to look at just rewording that motion. Because when it falls on the second Tuesday, it falls all over the place and we're not sure of conflicts.
Okay. Director Dowd, I see your hand up.
Chair, my hand is up as well.
Oh, okay. I didn't see your go. Go ahead.
So who are you calling on, Chair?
You, Director Dowd.
Okay, thank you. When I read the motion, I read a motion that said the second Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. And now I'm confused about what we're voting on, because it seems like the corporate officer was saying we're voting on something different.
From what I understand, she's offering an alternate motion that actually says the Tuesday prior to the finance committee and committee of the whole meetings. So it would fall in the same week.
So the motion on the floor, Chair, I think, is to have every second Tuesday, or the second Tuesday of every month at 1 p.m. And if we were going to vote on something different, I think we'd have to maybe move an amendment or move a different motion.
Yeah, I imagine we would. Before we go on with that, I'm going to ask Director McCormick.
Yes. Yes, thank you. You know, Councillor Elliott raised a point there about a conflict on the second Wednesday of the month. And I'm not sold on planning committee or any of the committees being on a specific, first week, second week, third week. I'm willing to go with whatever works. And I'm willing to kind of put trust in staff to not schedule, duplications that elected officials can't possibly attend. So, I think there's a bit of trust that way. Chair, well, I guess I'm asking if there's any way to put this forward, but kind of leave it to staff's discretion as to which week of the month is selected. That's a question.
Okay, corporate officer, do you have any comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. I think it would be good to get clarity about what the desire of the board is. And then if the intention is to, I have a draft schedule here as I believe it was intended to be presented by Director McCormick. Yeah, staff can do whatever we're directed to do, but at this point, we would need a little bit of clarity.
Yeah. I think what we've got here is a situation. We've got 7 people trying to organize schedules that would work for them, but there's not an ideal option presenting itself. If we take up another day, then it doesn't work for Director Lennox. If we put them all in one day, it doesn't work for Director McCormick. It does work for other people. I'm not really sure how to proceed here. We've got a motion on the floor right now. Maybe we should just go back to square one and say, this is the motion we have. It's 1 o'clock on, well, but now we've had a change of the motion, I guess, or we would have to make an amendment. Is that correct?
if that's with.
I see you, Director Dowd. Just give us 1 second.
Yes,
You have to pass the motion first on the floor before you make any amendments. So you have to wait to see what the outcome of the vote would be. I think you
Well,
get,
unless we make an amendment to the.
no, I think you're getting ahead of yourself. That's what I'm trying to say. You've got a motion on the floor for a specific time and place.
Yeah.
And you have to find out what the pleasure of the rest of the board is before you can even consider any amendments. Because if they defeat it, you're back to the original motion, really.
Oh, the original recommendation.
Yes, that's what I'm getting at.
Well, you can do an amendment to an amendment, can't you?
You
Like
can.
changing the whole.
All I'm saying is you've got a motion on the floor and you're already, I think, trying to push something and you don't know what the rest of the board wants.
All right. So, yes, Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I kind of want to echo Director Elliott's points that we really should be having a discussion and forming a consensus about these meetings. I'm just going to reiterate something that's on Elimina's own website. There's a myth that no discussion of an issue can take place until a motion is on the floor. In fact, the group can decide to discuss an issue informally first, exploring the nature of the problem, and only then propose a solution or an appropriate motion. Insisting on a motion before the problem is fully defined is equivalent to putting the cart before the horse. And I'm going to agree with the CAO that we have a motion on the floor, and that's what has now constrained us. So I'm wondering if it's the pleasure of the board that we table this motion so that way we can have a discussion about what works for this board, for our meeting schedule, to have the informal discussion to find out what works. I've put forward the idea of what about the first Wednesday for our planning committee. I'm also hearing from Director Lennox that he is working, and I'm curious about your hours and whether evening works better for you, because we want to form a consensus for what works for this committee, but also what works for the public and what works for our staff. Okay. So I'm just a little concerned that we have constrained ourselves by this motion. And I'm also a little concerned about, there's a lot of discussion over emails and over drinks and like trying to come up with what is the best time. And I really think that the place to have that discussion is here, in a public meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Director Dowd.
Yeah. Well, I was going to start with a point of order quite a while ago. And my suggestion is, so we have a motion on the table, and it's the one that was put before us in writing, moved by Director McCormick. And I think that the best way forward is to actually vote on that motion and see what happens to it. It may pass or it may fail. And if it fails, we are back to the main motion and we can do something. But we seem to be talking about almost everything else other than what time and day we want the meeting scheduled. So I would rather see us vote on this motion, which is properly in front of the group, and decide whether the group wants to change it to what I think the proposal is, which is the second Tuesday of every month at 1 p.m. and either approve it or reject it, and then go on to what people think should come next.
Okay. Director Elliott, we're going around here quite a bit, a lot of comments. I'm going to go to Director Fall first. He hasn't had anything to say.
Thank you, Chair. I just have one question because I heard our corporate officer, and this is through the chair to our corporate officer, because I believe she can clarify for me. We need to adopt a schedule before Christmas, before New Year's, I should say, Eve, December 31st. We can change that schedule at our pleasure afterwards. And the question is, how soon in advance can we change our schedule? So if we adopt a schedule now, and if there's some issues with it that arise and then are discussed in January, for example, how soon are we able to change? What's the earliest that the schedule can be revised from a meeting looking forward? So is it a month? Is it for the next month? Or is it for 2 months later?
Whatever you want.
I think, if I may, Chair.
Yes.
I think that's at the pleasure of the board. And, you know, our procedure bylaw does outline how standing committees can be canceled or rescheduled, but the board meetings, that's at the pleasure of the board. And, you know, if we go through with something today and it doesn't work, then we can revise that.
Okay, that helps me. Thank you. If I may, just as a brief follow-up, I believe that helps us here because we can struggle for a long time on finding a solution, and we won't find one because already we have 2 directors for whom this doesn't work, and we already heard some other issues come up. Scheduling is a very difficult problem. Mathematically, when you have 7 people and 7 different schedules with 3 meetings, plus all the other obligations, we all have some in the evening, some in the morning, ferries, work. I don't believe there will be a schedule. It would be very difficult to find. It's actually a very complicated problem. And I do believe discussion is good. And I think roll up sleeves and so on would be good, or maybe would have been good. I appreciate the work that staff put into this, and especially our corporate officer. We were polled on this. The constraints were applied. I gave very detailed constraints, and I appreciate the proposal in front that will be in the main motion coming up. But I think, you know, we can struggle here, but we can also go forward with something. And if there's really some issues that don't work for a director, those can be brought forward, and the schedule can be revised, ideally with more consensus on the revision, so we're not stuck in a circle of one day doesn't work and the other day doesn't work either. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Fall. I'm going to bring the question up because I think what we got to do is vote on it and then figure out where we're going to go. Either it passes or it fails, and then we can move on to another motion.
I move that we table the motion.
We table the motion. We have to come up with a motion tonight.
Well, I wanted to speak a second time.
Tabling the motion, Chair, does not mean that it is gone. It just means it'll come back again before the assembly on the same night. That way we can have the informal discussion.
Well, the whole concept of having the informal discussion, I know Ellie Mina says that, but that's not an accepted practice by a number of his other, you know, people in his position. And it's not common policy for our board. I don't know how we would even deal with that situation, or if that would be an appropriate way to approach it. Yes, CAO, please.
I can sense that there's a very big appetite around the table to actually really flesh this out. We have a legislated commitment to make. I think it would be best to defeat what's on the table right now, go with the recommended motion. At least the corporate officer can then advertise it, get it out there, and then we can bring the topic back to the committee of the whole in January, where you can start to talk about the rest of the year. But at least we will have something on the books. And I don't know what would happen if we didn't pass anything tonight, but I really don't want to be the first CAO in the province to maybe test those water. So I would recommend we get something on the books so we can advertise, meet our legislative requirements, and then we can bring back the topic of the rest of the schedule for the rest of the year, first meeting in January. And it may take 2-3 meetings, toss it around. But at least we've met our legislative requirements, because I think we've unearthed that this is going to be a bigger discussion than what we ever imagined.
I appreciate that, CAO. And final comment, Director Elliott.
Chair, may I speak?
Well, Director Elliott had her hand up, I know.
I wanted to say that during our original discussion, I brought up the points around this process and how we were constrained by motions prematurely in that meeting. And when we are constraining our conversation to only what's in the motion, we do not have the opportunity to discuss possible other options that would possibly work better. And we don't know if they'd work better because we're not allowed to talk about it. So I think that because we have a legislative requirement for a schedule, we should approve something that looks more like what we've been doing all along. Like option 1 is probably the better way to go because it doesn't require change from what the public understands things to be working and what we've been working with all along anyways. And then bringing it up in the new year to talk about what changes would work best for the committee, because I'm very sympathetic to those people that really don't want to have 3 meetings in one day. I'm not even on the planning committee, so I'm also sympathetic to people that work. But when all of us became part of the board, we were used to a current schedule and what they were doing. And so if we stuck with that until we actually got a consensus on what to change to, I think it would be a better way to go. So I would prefer to, and I vote against bringing this one forward too. I would prefer to not jump into any changes at all and until we've had a proper conversation, and polling people ahead of time to figure out what the conflicts might be is not the same as having a fulsome conversation. So this process has been flawed in how we talk about our schedule changes. And I don't think we can fix it by at this late date turning this down and going with the original motion, because the original motion is just as flawed as this one. So I would vote against all of the motions forward today and propose option 1, which is closest to what we do now. So that's where I stand.
Okay, well, we're here from Director McCormick, final comment, and then we're gonna do the vote.
Okay.
Just keep on
Thank
this all
you.
night long.
Yes, thank you. And I know everyone has a lot of really meaningful stuff to say about it. I would argue that support of the motion on the floor would be a better way to go than going right back to square one again. If nothing else, the existing motion, the one that's on the table right now, allows Director Fall to attend meetings in person, but only need to be gone 1 day. It also allows me to spend most of a day, but not 12 hours, here in meetings. And that would be a positive thing. It's not going to be perfect. And I say we change it, every month. That let's have a discussion until we get it right. But I think we do have to do something. And I think that moving forward on the recommendation that's on the floor would be a more positive step than not making any changes at all. So it would be, I'm going to vote for the recommendation on the floor. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, great.
I'm confused, Chair.
Okay, Director Gisborne.
My understanding is this is an amendment put forward by Director McCormick. It's not the recommendation from
Well,
staff.
it's not an amendment.
Sure.
It's an alternate motion.
Can I finish my question?
Yes.
Sure.
Director McCormick was saying that she's supporting the recommendation, but my understanding is that the motion before us is not the recommendation from staff. It's come from a director. I'm just confused. Are we?
Correct.
I believe she is saying she used the word incorrectly. She is supporting the motion that is on the floor.
Okay. Thank you.
No.
Sure.
Yes, I think this is your 3rd or 4th time, Director Gaup, but yes.
That would not make me different than any other director. And you've allowed many directors an opportunity to speak more than 2 times, and I would expect the same ability. So, I'd like to comment on where we are. I think
go ahead.
I'm convinced we're voting on the motion that the corporate officer put up in writing, which was that the planning committee be on the 2nd Tuesday of each month at 1 p.m. And that's it. I'm willing to vote in favor of that because I have, no conflict and no reason not to. When we set up the previous schedule, I went through all the meeting schedules I have with all the groups. Option 1 had numerous conflicts for me. Option 3 had numerous conflicts for me, and option 2 had none. That's why I chose it after careful consideration of what was being proposed. And the fact that when I agree to a meeting schedule, I'm also have to make it fit with a number of other groups who have regular meetings, some monthly, some quarterly, and we need to know ahead of time what those conflicts are. I'm okay with the 2nd Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. if that works for other directors, but I think we should vote on that motion and go ahead. And if it passes, it passes. If it doesn't, people, I guess, are free to make other amendments as they see fit.
Okay, thank you, Director Dowd. I haven't spoken on this actually. I am gonna go with the CAO's recommendation that we vote this one down, especially because there's some confusion as to the second Tuesday of the month, or is it prior to the Tuesday prior to the Finance and Committee of the Whole meetings? And then we would go back to the original recommendation, which I would suggest, or I'm going to vote in favor of, with the idea that we can revisit this and we can gather more information and try to find a consensus where people are happier than the options that we've been getting in front of us. So given the motion on the table that has been proposed by Director McCormick, which is the second Tuesday of every month for the Planning Committee at 1 o'clock and Committees of the Whole and Finance Committee on the Wednesday. All in favor?
Aye.
Director McCormick, they're all opposed.
Aye.
Okay.
Yay.
So that motion is defeated. So we have the recommendation in front of us. Would somebody like to move the recommendation? Director Paul?
I'll move the recommendation.
I'd like to move, the corporate officer had other language, which included reviewing this in 60 days. So I would like to move the recommendation with the inclusion of that clause. Just to,
1 second.
make this exciting. So it's that we approve option 2 and that we have the holiday season closures, but we also have a clause and that the board review the agenda within 6 months.
Okay, so we have the motion in front of us on the board. Directors Fall in doubt, and McCormick, can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay. And do we have a mover? Director Fall?
Yeah.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Director Lennox? Do we have any discussion? Dr. Gisborne?
Thank you, Chair. In the previous discussion, I heard, we don't want to go back to square one. I don't really think we've had square one, which is a discussion amongst the committee to build a consensus. The motion before us, which is option 2, is where we're going to be having multiple meetings in the same day. When I put forward my response to the potential for what works for me for meetings, I have a pretty open schedule because I'm self-employed on the farm, as long as it doesn't go too late. My preference is anytime before 10 can be a problem because I work at night, but my preferences are anytime between 12 noon and 9 p.m. But I also said that meetings should not last beyond 4 to 5 hours. That doesn't mean we should have 2 meetings on the same day, just split in half. I remember a time before we had a finance committee meeting and we just had the committee of the whole that dealt with finance issues and committee of the whole issues. And we ended up finding that was quite a lot for one meeting. So we ended up splitting the workload between a finance committee and a committee of the whole. By having both of those meetings occurring on the same day, I'm just seeing us as like we're going back to having one committee of the whole meeting. In which case, why not just have one committee of the whole meeting on one day, do away with the finance committee entirely, and then just have a half-hour break in the middle of it, because that's effectively what we're doing. Because and I don't think that's going to lead to good governance, because we don't want to make decisions by exhaustion. And I still think that we need to do the first step, which is to have that informal discussion around the table. We don't need a motion on the floor to have that discussion. So I am not going to support this recommendation.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other discussion at this, Director Fall?
Thank you, Chair. Even though I wanted to make sure we had that other clause in about reviewing in 6 months, it does not change my feeling that that this can be reviewed at the committee of the whole in January. And the primary sticking point seems to be the planning committee. I mean, I have full sympathies with Director McCormick and other comments made by Director Gisborne about having multiple meetings in one day. But I also have very strong sympathies to Director Lennox with his work schedule. I'm a working person too. I work full time on my consulting, but I'm able to twist things a little bit. My clients are pretty forgiving and I move things around, and I somehow am willing to work in the evenings and whenever I can. So I can work around whatever the schedule is, but I want to make sure it's something that can work. And the you know, it is exceedingly difficult. There's a very large number of possible schedules, and when you overlap with all the other constraints we all have, finding a solution, even with a many-hour debate or discussion, could be very difficult. It can work. This works very well for myself, at least. It seems to work reasonably well for Director Lennox for timing, and Director Dowd has said it works well, and I believe some other councillors, directors, it works. It has some issues, but having this adopted will meet our legislative requirements, and it'll also give us something to work with. I think it works, for me, it works a lot better than the current schedule, so that's why I'm more in favor of option 2 than option 1. But it puts it on the table, it puts it on the in front of us, the specific issues with it, and in particular the planning committee. If the planning committee members were able to come up with an option that they had consensus on, I would be supportive of that. I haven't heard consensus by the planning committee members yet, but if I did hear it, I would support it fully, because I think having a time for a planning committee meeting that's different from the one in option 2 doesn't affect me. So I'm happy if the planning committee is happy. So I think doing this meets our requirements. We can talk about it in January, and ideally, possibly just to have a change to the schedule reflecting the planning committee. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Director Fall and Director McCormick, I saw your little yellow hand.
Yep, thank you. I guess I have a question. If we pass this recommendation the way it's written, we review it in 6 months' time. But in order to recognize and go where Director Fall is mentioning, I think we need to have an amendment and not have it say 6 months' time, but have it reviewed by committee of the whole in January. So is it, I'm making that as an amendment, that this second part of the recommendation that says it will be reviewed in 6 months' time actually says it will be reviewed by committee of the whole in January.
Okay, Corporate Officer.
Thank you. So that the motion be amended to strike out the word June and insert January in its place.
Seconder, yes. Okay. Any other discussion on the amendment? Just put January in there instead of June.
I think I'll just add to this. Obviously, I'm approaching this as a new person to the schedule. When I ran, there was a different schedule, and now we're discussing a whole new world. I really was approached this trying to accommodate, the directors that have to travel. It's unreasonable. I think we can come up with a better plan. And really, I support Director Fall's comments that I'd like to pass this motion, accomplish our legislative requirements, and I agree with the amendment to look again at the planning committee and the committee of the whole, and we can figure it out. So I think in this case, for me, it was just too last minute to make this particular kind of arrangement, and I do want to talk to the other members of the planning committee. So I don't think there was any ill intent. It was, we were trying to figure it out on the fly, and there's competing interests, and I think we can get there. Moving most of these meetings, to be a little bit more efficient. I appreciate why we're looking at this for staff and for others, and I'm willing to do that. But I think we can get the planning meeting nailed down in January with this amendment.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Director Lennox. Director Gizmore.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering about the process for moving forward. We're going to review this in January. Are we going to do the same process where we have a motion on the floor and committee of the whole in January and still not have that informal discussion? Or should the planning committee, do it over emails or over drinks, or like to have that discussion? Because if we're not having the discussion at the public meeting, the question becomes, where is that discussion occurring?
I have a feeling the staff has on that. CAO.
Thank you, through the chair. I guess all the jokes and kidding aside, I know we don't want to have quorums outside of the meeting room here.
Exactly.
But I'm tentatively throwing around in my mind doing as what Director Gisborne has proposed, and that is having a discussion period. And perhaps that's all it is. It's just a set the timer, set a time, 5-10 minutes. Talk and discuss what it is that you guys want to flesh out regarding the meetings. Stop the timer. Then we move on to the committee of the whole the following month, come back and readdress what was spoken about and where you guys got. And I think we will arrive finally at that point where a number of days, a number of meetings will satisfy almost everybody. Remember, we're not going to satisfy everyone, and we'll certainly try to get there. And I think we can do that through this kind of like informal conversation.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other discussion on this topic so we can move on? Seeing none, all in favor? Oops, sorry.
Let's go.
Oh,
Amendment.
amendment. Sorry. Yes, the
Aye.
amendment.
Aye.
Chair,
Yes,
can
Director
you
Dove.
clarify for me what we're voting on, please?
It was the original recommendation with the change that, sorry.
Chair,
Corporate
can I?
Officer.
We're voting currently on the motion to strike out June and insert January, and then we'll vote on the main motion.
Thank you.
We're striking out January?
No, June.
And inserting January.
For
Okay.
review.
I just want to be clear what we're voting on.
No, that's great.
It's changed quite a few times in the last few minutes.
It has. So on the amendment, all in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
And Director McCormick, you are opposed or in favor?
No, I'm in favor.
Okay, so that passed unanimously. So now back to the amended motion. Any discussion?
Is the amended motion option 2 or
Option 2 as presented, but with January instead of
we're going
June.
to review it in January?
We're gonna review it, yes.
Okay, the motion before us is that we review in January, which I do support. However, the motion is that it is still option 2, which is 3 meetings in 1 day, which I do not support. And I really think that we've spent a lot of time running around in circles on this motion because we didn't have that initial discussion amongst our members. And therefore we have put the cart before the horse, and that's what's really constraining us, and it goes around and around and around. So I am actually going to vote against this motion because I do not support having all of our meetings on the same day. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any other discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, Directors McCormick and Gisborne opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much. 12.2 terms of reference for standing committees.
I'd like to put forward an alternate motion.
Sure, Director Gisborne.
I'll move that the board direct the chair to draft terms of reference for each of the standing committees, planning, committee of the whole, and finance, and bring them back to a future committee of the whole meeting for consideration.
Do we have a seconder for that motion? We do not. So going back to the original motion, we have I'll move it.
Seconded.
Seconded by Director Lennox. Thank you very much. We kicked this around at the committee of the whole. I think it's a good idea to have terms of reference for the 3 standing committees. Any other discussion? Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. From reading the Provincial Government's Ministry of Municipal Affairs website, it states the Regional District Board Chair may establish standing committees for matters the Chair considers would be better dealt with by committee. The Board Chair may appoint persons to those committees. Only the board as a whole has the power to appoint select committees and also appoint persons to those committees. I think it makes sense for the staff to have terms of reference for select committees, but since it is up to the chair to establish standing committees, then if someone's going to be tasked with setting a terms of reference for standing committees, it should be the chair, because it's the chair that establishes those committees. And if the chair chooses to say, get rid of the finance committee and bring back rural services or create other committees, then I think it's the chair's obligation to set the terms of reference because it's the chair establishing those expectations and creating that committee. So I will actually vote against this, this motion, because my understanding is if the board chair wants there to be terms of reference for standing committees that the chair has created, then the chair can write that. And I don't think it's worthwhile to task our staff, because it's the chair's obligation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Any other comments? Director Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to be clear that this is actually, this motion would lead to the board having terms of reference, not staff. And I actually, even though the chair has the authority to set new standing committees, I actually see this as a generous offer by our chair to actually allow the board to debate this. So staff would bring forward draft terms of reference, the board will review it and change it as the board sees fit and adopt it. And I see that as actually an opportunity for the board to discuss terms of reference rather than the chair simply saying it because the chair has the authority to do so. So actually I see this as a generous offer by the chair of delegating some of that authority and opportunity for discussion to the board. And I thank the chair for this opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion? Anybody else other than Director Gisborne? Okay, second kick at the can.
Thank you. My comments were not that, the chair should just write the terms of reference and that's it. It would be that the chair writes the terms of reference and then brings them to committee of the whole for discussion and consideration. So it would still be the committee of the whole and the board to actually accept whatever the terms of reference are presented. But I do believe that the obligation lies with the chair and not with staff to bring forward those recommendations and those expectations for what those committees are and what their obligations are, because it's up to the chair to create standing committees. And there's a few extra standing committees that, I would like to see, but I'm not the chair, so I don't create those things. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Director Gisborne opposed. Moving on to bylaws, 13.1, 2023 revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw. Somebody who would like to read that out for me. Director Lennox.
That the board give first and second reading of the qathet Regional District Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw number 583, 2022.
That's all directors awaited vote, seconded by Director Gisborne. Any discussion? None, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion carries. Director Lennox.
So the board give third reading of the qathet Regional District Revenue Anticipation Bylaw number 583, 2022.
Seconded by Director Gisborne. Thank you very much. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And that the board adopt the qathet Regional District Revenue Anticipation Bylaw number 583, 2022.
Seconded, Director Gisborne. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion carried, bylaw carried. 13.2, Director's Remuneration and Expenses Amendment Bylaw number 558.5, 2022. Somebody like to read that one out?
I'll go again. I guess that the board give first and second reading of Director's Remuneration and Expenses Amendment Bylaw number 558.5, 2022.
Seconded, Director Elliott. Any discussion? Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I made my comments relatively clear on this item earlier. I believe I'm tasked with speaking my mind and voting my conscience, and my conscience is that 6% just seems a bit too much for me, so I'll be voting against these bylaws. Thank you, Chair.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Director Gisborne opposed. Director Lennox.
That the board give third reading of the Director's Remuneration and Expenses Amendment Bylaw number 558.5, 2022.
Seconded by Director Elliott. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Director Gisborne opposed. And
finally, that the board adopt Director's Remuneration and Expenses Amendment Bylaw 558.5, 2022.
Director Elliott, thank you. Any discussion? Director Dowd.
I was seconding it.
Oh, okay. Any discussion? Saying none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Director Gisborne. Opposed, motion carries.
And I realize it's remuneration.
Remuneration, it's a hard one to say sometimes.
Ever since.
No reports, no new business, question period. Mr. Galinsky.
I thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. No questions tonight.
Okay, thanks very much. We do have an in-camera session, so if somebody would like to read that out, I'd appreciate it.
For it. I move that the board move in camera and the meeting be closed to the public on the grounds that the subject matter to be considered relates to matters covered by the community charter under section 91A. Personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the regional district or another position appointed by the regional district. C, labor relations or other employee relations. G, litigation or potential litigation affecting the regional district. K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a regional district service that are at their preliminary stages and that, in the view of the region, of the board, could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the regional district if they were held in public. L, discussions with regional district officers and employees respecting regional district objectives, measures, and progress reports for purposes of preparing an annual report under section 98, annual regional district report. And N, the consideration of whether a board meeting should be closed under provision of this subsection or subsection 2.
Easy for you to say.
Okay, do we have a second? Second, Lennox, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion carries. We're going in camera.
one second, Chair, and I'll start throwing things off.
Talk to
Thank
you.
you.
So your potty talk here, yeah.
Your toilet talk to yourself.
Did I tell you?
Chair, we're back in open
Smell.
session.
Okay, we are back in open session and the board would like to rise and report on the following. Quite a few items here. The board appointed Aaron Mazurek to the Agricultural Advisory Committee as a representative of the Fall River Farmers Agricultural Institute for a 2-year term expiring December 31st, 2024. And reappointed Dave Murphy as a member at large for a 2-year term expiring December 31st, 2024. Item 2, the board reappointed Dovi Dobrostansky. I hope I got that right.
Dobrostansky.
Jones and Bob Timms, and appointed Darcy Gillimod to the Texada Airport Advisory Committee for a 3-year term beginning January 1st, 2023, ending December 31st, 2025. Number 3, the board will send a letter of gratitude to Joseph Scott and to Warren Kahlon for their years of service on the Texada Airport Advisory Committee. The board reappointed Bridget Dorner to the Lasqueti Island Solid Waste Plan Monitoring and Advisory Committee for a term of 3 years, ending December 31st, 2025. The board approved signing of the letter of understanding between the QRD and QP 798 regarding continuous service for maternity or paternity leave and calculation of vacation entitlement thereof. And finally, the board referred the third quarter strategic plan progress report to the January Committee of the Whole. We're at the end of our agenda, so this meeting is adjourned. Have a happy holidays, everybody. Good meeting, everybody.
Oh,
You think he's out to the
happy
press,
holidays.
right?
I'll send that notice of motion.
Thanks, George.